And a very good evening to you. Welcome to the programme. How are you? Ordinarily, I'd be taking in the news right about now, but there's a problem with the news from FSN. I can't bring it in. It isn't my problem. It just means that I'm going live a little bit earlier than I ordinarily would go live. No problem, is there? Didn't think so. This is Wednesday's Richie Allen Show, by the way, live on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv, and of course richieallen.co.uk. Always good to be with you. Two terrific guests lined up for you this Wednesday. It is the 9th of January 2019. Two great guests and a pretty interesting news roundup as well. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the programme.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Yeah, caught me on the hop there, no news, but anyway, I've plenty of news for you.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Looking forward to speaking with David Vance of biasedbbc.org. David is a journalist, political commentator, political analyst, and will be speaking to me this hour about a couple of things. Politicians and journalists joining together, asking the police to intervene when politicians and journalists are jeered by the general public. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the great Brexit betrayal as well with David Vance. Regular guest David has been on the programme in the last 18 months, but he's not been on since the summer, last summer, so David joins me. And then later on in the programme, in the second hour, Christopher Bollyn returns to the programme. It's been more than a year and a half since Christopher was on the programme. Not many have done more than he to educate people about what happened on September the 11th, 2001. But he's done much more besides as well. Very valued contributor, valued political analyst. Chris Bollyn joins the programme to talk about a multitude of issues in the second hour. So as usual, it's a packed old show. I like to hear from you. You know that. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. That is my contact. At Richie Allen Show. Let me have a tweet. Tweet me. Tell me what you're thinking about these issues, or maybe raise something brand new. You can do that through the medium of Twitter. All right, you well? Hey, cold old day, eh? If you're in the north, in the northwest, it's been cold. Been a cold, chilly old day. Went out very early this AM, as I do for my run, and for the first time in a long time, I nearly went back indoors. But I said, no, tough it up. Brave it out, you big girl's blouse, you misogynistic bastard, Richie. Get out there and run. So I did. Anyway, the dog wouldn't tolerate me going back in. But it was cold. First few minutes was cold till I warmed up. Freezing overnight it was. Well, lots to get into, as usual. And there's only one place to start, really. The biggest story of the day was the bizarre shenanigans and goings-on the Palace of Westminster today, the Houses of Parliament. The big question of the day, the big story of the day is this. Let's hear from Sky News then. We'll take Sky, we'll take the BBC tomorrow. Here's Sky with the big story of the day.
Hello everyone, a very good afternoon from Westminster, where the government has just received another Brexit blow from MPs. Following a vote in the last hour, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, will now be required to lay out plans for a Brexit Plan B within 3 sitting days rather than 21 if she loses the meaningful vote next Tuesday.
The ayes to the right, 308. The noes to the left, 297.
Yeah.
Well, the Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, spoke after the result, kicking off 5 days of debate on the Prime Minister's Brexit deal. He said there appears to be deadlock over what MPs want when it comes to a trade deal.
The sort of trade deals including no deal. We had no deal plus, we've got Norway plus, we've got Canada plus, we've got Norway for now, we've got Norway forever. There's a whole spectrum of deals that different members cling to. But the reality is whatever deal needs to be put in place requires a winding down of our 45-year relationship with the European Union, and therefore whatever deal is put in place requires a withdrawal agreement.
A withdrawal agreement. Brexit Secretary Stephen Barclay droning on there. So what happened today then? Well, MPs will vote next Tuesday, on the withdrawal agreement that Theresa May made with the European Union. The meaningful vote. You knew that. That's next Tuesday. Theresa May is expected to lose that. Now, Dominic Grieve, an MP, the former Attorney General, he's a Conservative MP. He proposed an amendment to the bill, that is the withdrawal bill that will be voted on next week. So he proposed an amendment to it. And John Bercow, the Speaker, facilitated a vote on Grieve's amendment. Very controversial that today. Meaning, Grieve's amendment means that if and when Theresa May is defeated next week, she'll have to come back with an alternative plan in only 3 days and not 3 weeks as would have been the case. Do you understand that? Don't lie to me by nodding your head. I know you don't understand it, so I'll repeat it again. I know some of you understand it, but it gets complicated, and it's meant to be complicated to exasperate thee and me so that we just get fed up with the whole thing. So Dominic Grieve said, right, there will be a vote next week on the withdrawal bill. I want to table an amendment to that. And that amendment is that if May loses, she's got to come back with an alternative in 3 days rather than the 21 days. Now, that was voted on today because John Bercow facilitated a vote on it. Dominic Grieve's amendment won, meaning that May will only have 3 days when she loses next week. But not only that, more importantly, the finer print of Dominic Grieve's amendment means that the Commons will then have a chance to vote on alternative policies, anything from a managed no deal to a second referendum and all of that. And this ruling by Bercow, which has been very controversial today, was made against the advice of the Commons clerk. The Commons clerk is a guy called Sir David Natsier. So Brexit is being dismantled in front of your eyes, right? No surprise there. That's what's happening, really. No deal is evaporating, as was predicted by yours truly many, many, many moons ago. No chance that you can leave with no deal. And I said back in 2016 that to do a deal with the European Union as you leave is actually not to leave at all. Because by doing a deal with them of sorts, you are then agreeing to be bound by their rules and regulations in certain areas, meaning that you are not really leaving properly, right? Anyway, Kay Burley spoke with hard Brexiteer. He's hard as nails. Terminological inexactitude, darling. Jacob Rees-Mogg and Burley asked him about Theresa May's future, so she did.
How much longer can the Prime Minister hold on, keep losing votes like this?
Well, the vote today didn't really matter a row of beans, that it merely said the government must table a motion. Didn't require time for a debate or anything to happen in relation to the motion. It was much more to do with the Speaker and his interpretation of precedent than it was to do with Brexit. So a minority government must expect to lose votes. That's par for the course.
Now, what it does do is illustrate both to her, to the rest of the chamber and to the wider country that she doesn't have a lot of support from her own backbenches.
Well, if you look at what happened between 1974 and 1979 with the minority Labour government then, it regularly lost votes. And that if you have minority governments, that is what will happen. And we've been so used since 1979 to governments with comfortable majorities that we've rather forgotten what happens when there isn't a clear winner in a general election.
Yeah, 1979, they had a winter of discontent as well, didn't they? And then look what happened.
Well, that's because we were led by socialists who don't do things very efficiently, but this is a good Tory government, so we're not going to have a winter of discontent.
I suppose you would say that, wouldn't you? What happens
I would,
now?
yes.
Yes, indeed.
Burley trying to come off all Jeremy Paxman there, or Clive Anderson. I can't quite make up my mind which one. Jacob Rees-Mogg then makes the case for no deal, although he doesn't sound like his heart is in it anymore, God love him.
We are ticking down the clock, aren't we? We are in very great danger. So
very great danger, says Kay. What is the danger, Kay?
I would say of falling out of the European Union.
Falling out of the EU.
Without a deal. I'm guessing you would say in response, Mr. Rees-Mogg, that it's not a bad thing necessarily.
Well, Miss Burley, what I would say...
Miss Burley, Mr. Rees-Mogg, you might be listening to a playing of Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice on the radio. Miss Burley, Mr. Rees-Mogg, Mr. Chumley Warner, what does he say anyway?
...is that £39 billion that we would keep for leaving the European Union without a deal is good for British taxpayers, that's £39 billion of tax that will not have to be taken from them. So it's not all bad, and I think the language round it has been rather over-egged. Today we've had the president of the Port of Calais saying that Calais will remain open, there'll be no change to lorries going through, that all the fear stories are evaporating as we get closer to the 29th of March. Fear not.
Fear not, says Jacob. Good man, fear not. Look, Theresa May is cannon fodder, isn't she? For the global financial elite, isn't she? She's disposable, she's expendable, as they all are. However evil you might think they are, on the left and on the right and in the centre, they're expendable, disposable puppets. And I'm going to say it's playing out exactly as I said it would on June 24th, 2016. Remember, the podcast is there. Go to podomatic.com, scroll down, June 24th, listen to what I said in that monologue. This is the way it's going. And the poor bastards that are our neighbours and our friends, the poor bastards, most of them have no idea what's going on. They just see themselves getting shafted and they can't understand it, bewildered. Listen to the radio phone-ins actually, not just on the BBC but on commercial radio stations. Listen to people bewildered and they're getting angry. But what course will they choose as they realise what's happening to them? Most will swallow their anger and just go about in misery. So we just got screwed again, Richie, didn't we? Some, a minority for now, but growing all the time, will take to the streets and shout and scream, and some will fight. But they'll put their faith in someone on the far right or the far left. They'll put their faith in another version of the system, like Tommy the Tit Robinson, for example. Somebody who blames Muslims. Somebody who blames Anna Soubry or Yvette Cooper. Just another version of the system. People always look for a Pied Piper. And that's what the global financial elite wants, by the way. Us to blame one another, scapegoat other folks, never to look at who's really running things and pulling the strings. The anger that we will see and are seeing in a small way at the moment, the hostility, the divide and the conquer and all of that is what they want. Mostly people for now will swallow the rage. That's what they do. Massive civil disobedience and non-compliance, I think, will only ever materialise when we stop blaming the other for the chaos that we are seeing right now. But I've been saying that for a long time. So I have 13 and a half minutes past 5, past the hour, as we are live from South Manchester on Fab Radio 2, triggerwarning.tv, TuneIn Radio and richieallen.co.uk. This is your Richie Allen Show, Europe's most listened to independent radio show. It is always good to be with you. Loads of tweets coming in on this. Back to members of Parliament and journalists uniting to ask the police to intervene when they are jeered at by passers-by or by groups. Owen Jones just won't feck off, just won't go away, this muppet, this tiny little man who operates, who gesticulates, who screams like a pipsqueak from the offices of the Guardian newspaper. He won't go away, but he's good for a laugh or two. Here he is with Jon Snow on Channel 4. He's with Jon Snow. See, can you spot the fib? A fib, by the way, that I'm not entirely sure is a mistake by Owen Jones. Spot the lie.
What we're talking about are fascists. It's the far right. And this was the same group who attacked a left-wing bookshop, Bookmarks, a few months ago. And I just think what's important is we put this in the context of a rising far right in this country. Look, Joe Cox, a Labour MP, was murdered 2.5 years ago by fascists. Another Labour MP, Rosie Cooper, was killed by a fascist. Another far-right terrorist, Darren Osborne, ploughed his car, do you remember, into worshippers, Muslim worshippers. He said he came to London to kill Jeremy Corbyn and Sadiq Khan as a bonus because they were terrorist sympathisers.
But are you saying that these people who've been swirling around here, who are completely absent tonight, I don't know how the police have done it, but they've got rid of them, are...
I don't know how the police have done it, but they've gotten rid of them, said Jon Snow. You know damn well how the police did it anyway.
Are an organised faction?
They are an organised faction. I mean, journalists have been trying to work out exactly who they are. They're pro-Tommy Robinson supporters. They wear Trump hats and they run around shouting mindless abuse.
Yeah. Did you catch the lie by Owen Jones there? Did you hear the lie? No? I'll play it for you just in case you missed it.
Another Labour MP, Rosie Cooper, was killed by a fascist.
Just in case you missed it.
Another Labour MP, Rosie Cooper, was killed by a fascist.
What kind of fuckery is this?
It's plain old fuckery, Amy. Rosie Cooper is alive and well, by the way. There was a plot, allegedly, to murder her and people were sent to prison. But she's not dead. So why do I think that wasn't just a slip of the tongue by Jones, and why do I think that he was lying? Well, because he lied repeatedly in his interview with the totally inept Jon Snow. He lied repeatedly. He said the guys who jeered him on Monday were responsible for smashing up a left-wing bookshop last summer. And no, Jon Snow, King of the North, didn't ask Owen Jones for any proof whatsoever. Why, Jon Snow, King of the North, why didn't you ask Owen Jones for any proof?
I'm a bastard.
What was that? I didn't get that. What?
I'm a bastard.
Yeah, because you're a bastard, Jon Snow. Because you're a bastard. Jesus. Well, I'm a big child. Jeremy Corbyn. He is a bastard. Jon Snow is nothing but a bastard. Why, Jon Snow?
I'm a bastard.
Because you're a bastard. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, wants safe spaces, by the way, for politicians. This is a result, of course, of listening to cretins like Owen Jones. Jeremy wants safe spaces.
I also, Mr. Speaker, agree with the Prime Minister on the point she made about intimidation of members of Parliament and representatives of the media.
Shut up, you bearded twat. Get on with it.
Outside this building, as happened a few days ago when the member for Broxtowe and Owen Jones of The Guardian were intimidated outside this building.
They weren't intimidated at all. They were jeered. They were laughed at. They were mocked.
And I send my support and sympathy to both of them.
He sends his support and sympathy to Owen Jones and Anna Soubry. I think they're going to be okay.
But we also have to be clear, Mr. Speaker, that intimidation is wrong outside this building, as it is wrong in any other aspect of life in this country.
Yeah.
And we have to create a safe space. A safe space.
A safe space.
We have to create a safe space.
A safe space.
For political debate.
And he was jeered even by members of his own party. Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
You see what I mean, Mr. Speaker? I'm calling...
You see what I mean, Mr. Speaker? I'm calling for a safe space and I can't even get a safe space in here.
Calling for a safe space for political debate.
Order, we've got a long way to go. The questions will be heard and the answers will be heard. No amount of heckling, no amount of noise will make any difference. Difference to that simple fact. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, I also am sure the whole House would join me in wishing a speedy recovery to the 2 British soldiers who were injured in Syria last
of course.
week.
Little bit of virtue signalling for the soldiers. Why not? They were injured in Syria. Do you remember when Jeremy Corbyn used to have balls? Do you remember when he used to have cojones? Leah Roddy, by the way, is the Irish for balls. Hairy testicles. Big old balls Jeremy used to have. Now he's appealing for sympathy for British soldiers in Syria. What the fuck are they doing there, Jeremy? What are they doing in Syria? Used to be a time, son, when you would, have the courage to condemn the presence of British soldiers in Syria in the first place, but of course not anymore, Jeremy Corbyn. Do you want to laugh? Because I know you're fed up of all this madness. Do you want to laugh? Here's a laugh. A man phoned 999 to request a DNA test because he believed his partner was sleeping around. This is true. During the call, the man asked for an ambulance to be sent around to his home to perform the test on his cheating partner. Sometimes you just have to laugh, to take a breather after all the hard news and giggle your MFing arse off. Have a listen to this.
Ambulance service, is the patient breathing?
Okay, please, I'm just ringing because my partner should cheat on me.
Right, is the patient, listen to me, is the patient breathing?
Hello?
Is the patient breathing?
Everybody okay? I want you ambulance to come to my house to go to do DNA test.
DNA.
Excuse me. Why?
Because my partner should cheat on me.
Right. Okay, this is an emergency service. We don't do DNA
tests.
It's
an emergency service as well because we argue for that.
Right.
To sleep around.
Sir, listen to me. Listen to me. This is an emergency line. We don't deal with domestic cases and we don't do DNA tests. So I suggest you speak to somebody else.
Which number? Can I have the number, please?
I've not got a number for DNA.
And then she warned him about wasting the time of the emergency services. I might be racist for playing that now. You never know. I think the gentleman is from Africa. God love him. This is your Richie Allen Show. David Vance is next. 22 minutes past the hour. Welcome to the show. Always good to be with you, eh? And say welcome back to the programme, David Vance. David, how are you?
I'm very well. Tech issues notwithstanding, I'm okay. Thank you, Richie.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, that'll be something you'll have to sort out quick, smart, because you're in demand. There'll be a lot of people looking to speak to you today and overnight. Before we talk about collusion between journalists and the media, which is a rather startling thing to see journalists and the media coming together to demand that people are moved on or arrested, and we will talk quite a bit about that in a minute. What about the extraordinary scenes in Westminster today where Dominic Grieve asked to table an amendment to next week's vote, the withdrawal bill? Grieve, of course, being a Conservative Member of Parliament, former Attorney General, and his amendment saying that if May's deal is voted down next week, and it should be voted down, of course, that she will have to come back to Parliament within 3 days with an alternative rather than 21 days. Absolute consternation that Bercow allowed this amendment to be voted on today. The vote was carried. This is just a great Brexit betrayal, David, is it? What's going on here?
Yes, it's all part of it. I mean, listen, in one regard, I'm not that concerned about the Grieve amendment being passed, because actually this should have been passed arguably on the 24th of June 2016, because anything to stop Theresa May from kicking this in the long grass further and further down the road. She should come back once her lousy withdrawal agreement is voted down next week, Richie. She should come back within, never mind 3 days, within 24 hours to say, right, that's it. It's a WTO no deal Brexit, which is legally catered for within parliamentary legislation. So I know people are getting a bit hysterical about it. I mean, it does speak volumes for John Bercow, but then some of us for some years have said exactly what we think about John Bercow. So I'm not surprised when a pig grunts. Are you?
No, I'm not. And I can't fault anything you've said there. But what we're seeing and what we saw yesterday with the Yvette Cooper and Nicky Morgan amendment is members of Parliament attempting to make it an impossibility to leave without a deal and to move on to WTO terms. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and that's the more serious thing. I mean, the logic that they deployed yesterday there's no logic in it. I mean, if they're so concerned about a WTO Brexit, Richie, then wouldn't it be very logical to make sure that the government could take whatever financial provisions required to make that as pain-free as possible? And yet that's exactly what they've ensured doesn't happen. And ultimately what lies at the heart of this is we have a parliament in rebellion against the people. And that's the UK January 2019, Richie. It's that simple. I mean, this has been building for 2.5 years. And here we are, and we see it. I mean, it's in clear sight where we have a substantial number of parliamentarians who essentially reject the will of the British people.
Yeah, you have people like Anna Soubry and Cooper and others whose own constituencies voted in pretty large numbers to leave. I think in Soubry's case, more than 70% of her constituents said, look, we've had enough of the European Union. And yet she's one of the most ardent Remainers there is. You know what I can't understand is why more people, when I say more people, I mean ordinary people like me, why they don't grasp the madness of trying to appease the European Union in terms of why they can't see or why they can't ask themselves, why do we want to be part of a club or a cartel that is basically threatening us with all sorts of doom and misery if we do in fact leave it? Why would you want to be part of any organisation like that? I heard somebody on another independent radio show compare the European Union's behaviour to that of gangsters in the Bronx in the 1930s. If you opened a shop, David, the gangster would come along and say, listen, pay us money, and if you pay us money, we'll make sure you've got no problems with your chain of supply. But if you don't pay us money, we'll put you out of business and we'll smash up your store. That's exactly what the European Union is.
It absolutely is exactly that. And I guess, to answer the first question you raised, Richie, why do sort of, if you like, ordinary people not see that? I mean, I fundamentally blame the media who have portrayed this through a fishbowl lens and presented it always in terms of the UK is the weak supplicant and the European Union is the mighty arbitrator of our future. So I actually blame the media for it. But as you say, when you look at the behaviour of the European Union, why would you want to be in a club that beats you up, that threatens you, that in one particular way seeks to break up the United Kingdom via the backstop? I mean, this is but then I would argue, going back to 2016, that's why we said we wanted out. And always remember, Richie, we voted to leave. We never voted for a deal. We voted to leave. Leave means leave. That's what Theresa May should have been working on, how quickly we could get out. Instead of that, we've had 2.5 years of deferral and ultimate betrayal, and that's what you're seeing right now.
Can you settle, by the way, it's David Vance, by the way. David is on the line. David is a political commentator, geopolitical analyst, and he founded biasedbbc.org. You got to check that website out, folks, if you haven't checked it out before. I will tweet links to your current project, David. I've tweeted out plenty of links to it in the past.
Yes,
that's not at all. No, it's great to have an alternative. David is heavily involved in altnewsmedia.net. Check that out if you haven't checked it out before. Settle something for me, will you? Help me explain to people. David is a unionist, and he's very much aware of and has an understanding of the politics of Northern Ireland. One of the things that keeps getting thrown out there is that peace in the province would be under threat if, because of this backstop or lack of a backstop. I don't buy into that at all, David. Whatever side of the fence you're on. Look, I'm an Irish Republican. You're a unionist. We can speak all day long. I don't believe that there's any appetite among Republicans or unionists for a return to the days of old. And I don't believe that this particular issue is going to drive people onto the streets again, killing one another and terrorising one another in the ways that we saw in the past. Help me out with this.
Absolutely, not at all. It's absolute garbage, the stuff that's been talked about in terms of, if we have a hard Brexit and there's a hard border, then that would mean that the streets would run red with blood again. This is absolute. But this goes back again. I mean, who's saying this? Because some of the people that threaten that produce these dire warnings, Richie, are the same people in the case of the Irish government who have said they won't put up a hard border. The British government have said they won't put up a hard border. Stormont, the DUP, have said they're not interested in a hard border. So again, this is politics, but it's Machiavellian politics, isn't it? Because what they're quite happy to do is to scare, if you like, ordinary 9-to-5 people with the threat that the spectre of the troubles reoccurring. But there again, of course, it also, Richie, I would make the point, it also sort of then raises the question, well, hang on a second, we've had 20 plus years of the so-called Good Friday Agreement, and the terrorists all went away, didn't they? So if they went away, where would they be coming back from exactly? Not that it would happen anyway. And another thing, just when I'm on it, Richie, because it does speak to people like yourself and me with their different backgrounds. But let's be honest, most people on the island of Ireland are very happy to get along together. We mightn't agree on everything, but we can get along fine. No need for anything like violence or anything like that. And so I think certainly the Irish government, and this is where I would blame Varadkar, he's been quite happy to act like a little marionette on behalf of his Brussels handlers and issue some of these dire warnings. The British government, I suppose, in their own regard, not that I'm a fan, as you know, Richie, they have consistently said, we won't put up a hard border. So wherein lies the responsibility for such fear? I think ultimately it lies in Brussels, the very place we're wanting to get out of. All these things are reinforcing the very wise decision we made to leave.
A lot of Republicans, David, a lot of Republicans agree with you. I've heard Republicans on RT and other networks, Dublin-based Republicans and Monaghan-based Republicans, saying that Irish politicians, that's the Republic of Ireland, make no secret of the fact that the country is not a sovereign state anymore. And one Republican described it as indentured labour to the European Union. It's an absolute farce that a country like mine, I'm very proud of my country, as you are of your country, and you should be, and I should be proud of my country. I'm proud of my country, but not anymore I'm not, because I have a country that goes with its cap in its hand to beg permission to sign off on a budget for a fiscal year to Germany. It's an outrage. And that's what the European Union...
You're right, but I mean, the other thing about Ireland is, if the UK leaves on WTO terms, and that means tariffs are introduced, and we leave in WTO terms because the EU just simply wouldn't give us a deal, and Varadkar's been very keen to make sure that that's the case, then what's going to happen to Irish the Irish farming industry, the beef industry, a huge chunk of which is exported into the UK? All of a sudden, Richie, it becomes completely uncompetitive, and that whole rich part of Ireland's history and heritage could go by the way. So this is where I can relate to actually Irish Republicans who feel disgust at the Irish government in terms of how they have been blatantly manipulated, and in the case of Varadkar and Coveney, very happy to go along with the manipulation until we're reaching the point now where the clock's getting very close to midnight, isn't it?
It absolutely is, David. Just before we talk for a few minutes about, mindful of the time as well, and your time, about the Anna Soubry-Owen-Jones thing. Well, let's get into that. Because it's massively important, this. Oh, yeah, before we get into that, you took a little bit of stick on Twitter for making reference to the gas being turned off for the Republic of Ireland. But you weren't suggesting that. It's amazing that people can't read between and see the context of what people are tweeting. You were just kind of ironically saying Project Fear works both ways, right? I think that's what you were doing anyway. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was doing. It would be in no sane world would anyone seek to stop energy flowing to anywhere, not least Ireland. But I was simply making the point that if you want to play the Project Fear game, well, I guess lots of people could play that. But I completely oppose Project Fear, Richie, and I consistently tweet out against it. I mean, I laugh at it. It's pretty much laughable. Rubbish, But yes, I was given a bit of a bruising on Twitter for allegedly seeking to starve the Irish into submission. Something I would never.
It's a bit ridiculous, isn't it? It's just context. People just need to understand context. Now, I don't like people shouting at people and calling people names. Now, some people would say, you're a bit of a hypocrite, Richie, because at times I can throw a few, I can throw a few things out there when I do my monologue and all of that. But look, a lot of it, most of it is in jest, and I certainly don't barrack people and chase people. However, watching the Owen Jones video, the Guardian journalist in inverted commas, and the Anna Soubry stuff, I saw robust exchanges. I saw people who had been, named and criticised in Jones's columns, and people who had been criticised and named and labelled by Jones when he makes his appearances on the BBC and Sky. I didn't see anything dangerous. I didn't see anything overly hostile. And I don't believe that anybody should be trying to criminalise the use of the word Nazi. And I also find it incredibly ironic, and I'm a bit of a champagne socialist, so I'll admit this, I find it incredibly ironic that people on the left, who are forever calling people on the right Nazis, now want people to be rounded up for using the term Nazi. Should we laugh at some of this, or is this very, very dangerous territory we're in now?
Both. I think both is the answer. At one level it is laughable, but at another level it's very serious. I mean, for example, if I were able to, if the use of the word Nazi is to be criminalised, which I think the Metropolitan Police are potentially considering, if that be the case, I'm going to be a millionaire, because I am frequently referred to as a Nazi, a fascist, you name it, on Twitter, and so my lawyers will have a happy time as a consequence of this. But, on a more serious level, this is about closing down debate, isn't it? Let's call it out for what it is. In the case of Owen Jones, this is the feral left, as I call them, who dish it out and who can't take it. And I don't believe, Richie, in shouting at people or abusing people. I don't do it, or try not to do it. It would be wrong of me to do it, I think. However, we live in a democracy. The people like Jones and Femi and Soubry, who got the verbals outside Parliament. I mean, these are people working to subvert the actual will of the people. And in other times, they might have suffered a worse fate than being called hurty words. So and the other thing is, they're all adults. We're adults, Richie. If people call you names, what you do is you deal with it. You grow up, you move on. Yeah. Interestingly enough, let me tell you this briefly, back in December, I was at an event in the Commons, and I went across to just exactly where this incident happened, just opposite the entrance to Blackrod's entrance to the Commons. Went across there to the Remain people who are permanently camped there. Wonder who's paying for that. Anyway, went to see them and have a chat with them. I got dogs abuse. Dogs abuse. Did I care? No. Would I expect anything else? Probably not. I think they're probably nutters anyway. But this is about closing down the opportunity to basically express dissent. It's not the real problem here. They're closing us down. So I also think, I heard in the Commons today MPs talk about MPs need a safe space. Yeah, they've got a safe space. It's inside the Palace of Westminster. Outside the Palace of Westminster, they're accountable to us. Clearly, Richie, there's no room for violence. I understand that. I also, just by the by, would raise with you on particularity of Anna Soubry. There's been interesting video footage circulating on Twitter today concerning the gentleman who called her a Nazi. And I think that probably merits some investigation as well, because that particular gentleman seems to have been present in other situations, and I'm not sure he's a Brexiteer. So, again, Anna Soubry came on and played the St. Anna martyr role. But actually, if you look at the video footage when she was being harangued, let's call it loosely harangued, she was smiling. She didn't look terribly scared to me. But then again, Richie, and I'll go finish with this one. The media instantly jumped on it, didn't they? And they've used that footage of a bit of verbal abuse of those particular Remainers to somehow suggest that the 17.4 million that voted out were all kind of brutal thugs who won't, who will abuse female politicians. Couldn't be further from the truth. So it's another reason, in my view, to absolutely despise, which I do, the mainstream media.
Yeah, it definitely stinks or smacks of a manufactured story, of an event that was manufactured to bring about a result later on, to bring about a solution. I have no doubt about that, because Subury was in no danger. There were police officers present. When Owen Jones was being accosted by a guy who was having a go at him, there were two policemen following him, and they didn't feel there was any need to intervene at all. But it's kind of like a problem, reaction, solution thing. Do you think maybe, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, Max, on this, thanks for your time, do you think maybe that this is a pretext or a precursor to, well, the establishment is worried about what's going to happen when Brexit is thwarted? Because I don't want to be right, but I think I am right. Brexit is never going to happen. It was never going to be allowed. Do you think those behind thwarting Brexit, the establishment media and the political class, they fear a reaction further down the line from the plebs like me? Is that what they expect? Is that why we're seeing this kind of clamp down on speech and on the right to assemble and protest?
I think so. I mean, you just have to look at what happened to, again, one of the guys involved in the protest yesterday. He's had his PayPal's been closed down. The police have taken him in for questioning and stuff. The establishment should fear us. I hope they do fear us. Because, like you, it's going to be very difficult to understand how Brexit can be delivered. But if it's not delivered, Richie, I mean, let's be clear, the consequence is the subversion of the biggest vote in the history of the United Kingdom, and that subversion will have been brought about by Parliament. And again, to go back to when I was outside Parliament last month, couldn't help but notice, Richie, there's a big statue. It was moved outside of Parliament, lest it cause offence to be, when initially it was going to be put inside Parliament, of someone who I know Irish people don't like, but anyway, Cromwell. And I'm reminded of what Cromwell did to parliaments that in his view, had ceased to be of any use to the people. And I just wonder, things come in different formats, Richie. It came in the mid-1600s with a man on a horse and his army. But you see what's happening in Paris with the Gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets. And who can say when the spark actually is struck that somehow brings the people to life? There is this thing that, the French revolt, and look at the trouble that globalist icon Macron's in at the moment. But, maybe when the Brits do see that they're not going to get the Brexit that they voted for, maybe that's when they do finally rise up and say to this Parliament, to paraphrase Cromwell, go in God's name and go now. Because I've certainly had enough of them, all of them in Parliament, all subversives, all debauching the whole process of democracy. Something has to give, Richie, and it's going to give, I suggest to you, in the next couple of months.
We're going to see, aren't we, very soon. Folks, if you haven't before, check out altnewsmedia.net, biasedbbc.org. Thanks for coming on, David. I appreciate that.
Pleasure.
I look forward to speaking to you again, and Happy New Year to you and yours, by the way.
Same to you, Richie. Many thanks. Pleasure to be on the show. Thanks
Cheers,
a lot.
mate. Bye for now. Bye. That was David Vance, live on the line from his home. Glad we got him on there and we sorted out the technical problems there. altnewsmedia.net. We don't want violence. I don't want to see violence. But I don't know if we're predisposed. I don't know if there's some gene in people. If there's some gene is there a default position in people that they can't see the wood for the trees, that they are condemned people to always look for the other to blame. Everything that we've been talking about today is real, it's genuine, it's important. But who's responsible for it? or what is responsible for it. Most people will look to the other to blame. They will look to the person of a different religion. They will look to the Muslim. They will look to the Jew. They will look to the migrant to blame. When will people wake up and realise that what is to blame? And I call it the global financial elite. The hidden hand. You know, when will people see that and see through what is actually happening, but more importantly, why it is happening? Who is behind mass immigration? What is behind it? When will people look beyond that? Well, I won't blame the Muslim or the Sikh or the Polish guy or the Jew or whatever. It's too easy. What's going on? It's not his fault. What's really happening? Why are we seeing multiculturalism that hasn't worked? Who decided to impose that on societies around the world? When will people understand that the entities that came up with multiculturalism, and I'm an Irish immigrant in this country, by the way, so, you know, I'm very much self-aware. When will people realise that multiculturalism was an idea that was never a benevolent one, that it was a tool of divide and conquer? When will people start to realise that? Because I think when people realise that, they'll come together then. And Muslims and Sikhs and Christians and Jews will stand together and say, right, together we've had enough of this system. We've had enough of it. We've had enough of being divided. We've had enough of being driven to hate one another and despise one another and to hate the look and the sound of one another. Who's making us like that? What's making us like that? Only then will people begin to really see through the geopolitical events that we try to analyse on programmes like this. Will they see through the manipulation? And will they be absolutely mortified with embarrassment at how easy it was to manipulate them? How easy it was to turn you against your neighbour, to turn you against the Muslim family over across the road there. How easy it was to manipulate you. And while all that's going on, well, all the money, all the land, everything of any real value in the world pours into our coffers while you kill one another. That's what it is. It is as simple as that. I probably get 50 or 60 emails a day. Probably. I can't respond to most of them, not because I'm rude or because I don't care. I just don't have the time to do it. I see them, I don't even open some of them. I can't. It's just me here. There's no producer, there's no editor, there's no secretary. I can't do it. And the ones I do open, I get accused of oversimplifying something that's very complicated. It isn't complicated. Everything that's going on now is being controlled by a tiny, tiny group of people whose names are not known. They are not known to the political party leaders. They are not known to the owners of the mainstream media. This is the spider's web that Ike has mentioned in the past, that Jordan Maxwell has talked about. This is the compartmentalisation. People don't know who this tiny elite group of people are. I call it the global financial elite, super elite, but manipulating everything. And they just don't know. It's easier then to throw in with the latest hero of the far right or the far left. Support people like Tommy the Tit, and you know, it's all too easy. The difficult thing to do is to stop and go, what's really happening here? Why is this happening? You know? And only until people do that will we see any change, because that understanding leads to non-compliance. Following Tommy the Tit Robinson and following lunatics like Owen Jones and Momentum, and by the way, Momentum on the far left and Robinson and the goons on the far right are two sides of the same coin. They are system servers as much as any politician, as much as any royal family member. They are system servers. Because following those groups of people lead to more and more and more division and to eventually violence, when the only answer is non-compliance and an acceptance that the person living next door to you is not the problem. The person living across the street who looks a bit different isn't the problem. Something else is the problem. That's the way it goes. I know I've said this before and I will say it again. Somebody sent me an email yesterday. You do repeat yourself, Richie. Yes, I do. It bears repeating this over and over again until it gets into people's skulls. You know? Anyway, 3.5 minutes to the top of the hour. I'm looking forward to catching up with Christopher Bollyn. It's been quite a while since Christopher was on the show. It's been a long time since he was on. Bollyn.com is Christopher's website, by the way, in case you haven't checked it out before. He's a really, really interesting man and will be joining me in the second hour to chat with me. And as usual, if you want to tweet him through me, do so by tweeting at Richie Allen Show. Paul tweets at Suburban Buddha. He tweets or alleges that Owen Jones is being used by the Israeli lobby and another friend of Israel. He's a useful idiot in a much bigger and much more sinister plot. I would go along with that. Owen Jones is not very bright. He isn't. He might be articulate. He might be able to give a good soundbite on television, but he isn't bright. He's obviously not bright. He's a classic proud pretender, you know. He's not an intellectual by any means. Doesn't have any understanding of what's going on, but easily used and easily manipulated. Like Tommy the Tit Robinson. Like I said, it's hard for people to understand that concept. That Jones and Robinson would be two sides of the same coin. They couldn't get their heads around that. But it's true. It's true. Pied Pipers. Momentum is a Pied Piper association. The far right is a Pied Piper organisation. It's designed to get more and more people to see it as the solution. The more disenfranchised, the more disillusioned people become. The more the system says, brilliant. The system says they are disenfranchised, they are disillusioned, wonderful. Now we will give them the alternative. It's classic. It's the system saying, here is the alternative to us. We don't care. It's beautiful, really. Overly simplistic, Richie. It isn't. It's not overly simplistic at all. It's a fact, is what it is. We're coming up for 6 p.m. We're approaching the top of the hour. On Wednesday's Richie Allen Show, January 9th, 2019. And I am Richie Allen. This is music from The Lightning Seeds, a song called Sense. Don't miss Christopher Bollyn, who joins us live in a few minutes' time. He'll be with me for most of the second hour. Crashing the lyrics there, not good. Music from The Lightning Seeds on the Richie Allen Show, 2 minutes past 6. Welcome back to the programme. Welcome back. Loads and loads of tweets on Brexit, on MPs and journalists and the banning of protest and all of that. Huge interest in that. And that's when it's going to run and run and run as well. There's no doubt about that. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. You can email Richie at richieallen.co.uk, but I don't always get the emails. I'll explain that in more detail another day. Email through the website, richieallen.co.uk, if you've got a comment for me, or if it's something serious. If it's about advertising, I'm just going to mention this because I never ever do this. I mentioned just before Christmas, as I was winding up the programme for the Christmas period, that the statistics, and they're widely available statistics, by the way, on Podomatic.com. Last year, in 2018, the programme, now forget the live show audience numbers, forget the YouTube view count, forget the iTunes downloads, forget Spotify. On Podomatic alone last year in 2018, the programme was downloaded or was streamed, as in listened to, over 2.5 million times. That's the Richie Allen Show, by the way. Presented, produced, edited by myself, Richie Allen, with no hand, no part, no assistance from anybody else. It's just me. And that's an extraordinary thing. The programme averages about 300,000 listens a month on YouTube, despite the shadow banning of YouTube, despite the deletion of the original channel. And it gets tens of thousands of more downloads a week on iTunes and on Spotify. It really does. Not to mention the fact that the live show has audience figures that regularly hit about 50,000 listeners. That's in the live show. That's quite extraordinary. Why am I saying that? Well, because I'm open for business. Advertise your product with me. Contact me through the contact section of richieallen.co.uk. If you've got something that benefits people, if you've got an ethically produced product, if you've got something healthy to advertise, if you've got a book to advertise, contact the programme through the contact segment, a section even, of richieallen.co.uk, and I will get back to you within a day or two. All right, those numbers are genuine, by the way, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to brag about those numbers because I can demonstrate them very easily. We can prove, I've often done that by presenting memes on Twitter and on Facebook to show these numbers in daylight. In the cold light of day, these are the numbers. I'm very proud of those numbers. I'm not arrogant. I'm very proud of them. In 4.5 years' time, the programme has grown into a programme that has a real reach, not only in the UK, but around the world as well. And if you want to advertise or showcase your product on it, the way to do that is to simply, as I said, contact me through the website. That's richieallen.co.uk. My next guest is an old friend of the programmes. I first met him when I was working for Talk Radio Europe in Spain. I was recommended to speak to him by other friends of mine and other broadcasters. He's a brilliant man. He's a terrific geopolitical analyst, a great writer and author. And I've mentioned several times, I'm going to mention it again today, nobody has done more than him. Nobody has done more than him to poke holes in the official narrative, the official explanation for September the 11th. He's done an incredible job travelling the world, by the way, travelling the world and speaking at conferences, sold out conferences all around the world. And his books are incredible, including his book Solving 9/11, which I will tweet out links to during the course of this conversation. It's been too long since he was on this show. Thankfully he's back. It's great to welcome him back to the show. Christopher Bollyn, welcome back. How you doing, Chris?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thanks, Richie. Can you hear me all right?
I'm hearing you loud and clear. You've got a wonderful microphone there. It's brilliant, Christopher. Thanks for coming on, and Happy New Year to you and Helia, by the way. I hope you're well.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
Now, when it's been ages since you were on, but everybody knows who you are. You've built up a fabulous profile and following over the years. And when I announced you were coming on today, I was given several emails came in, several tweets of things to ask you about. The first one is the presidency of Donald Trump, Christopher. When Donald Trump came to power, a number of promises were made in his election campaign. One of them was a promise to end US interventionism, to bring back US troops, to stop interfering in the problems of other countries and other regions. And among the things claimed about Donald Trump was that Donald Trump had a real understanding of September the 11th, that Trump personally knew that the buildings couldn't have come down because of the plane strikes. And we might talk about that. But what about Trump's plans or promises to stop US interventionism, to bring the troops home? He hasn't done that, Christopher. What have you made of the Trump presidency so far?
Well, he has promised many things to during his campaign. He also promised that he would tell the American people who was behind bringing down the Twin Towers. And of course, he said he would have better relations with Russia and that he would pull troops out of Syria, what have you. And he's been apparently stymied. He's been thwarted in these efforts. I think that he sincerely does want to bring the troops out, but that his hands are tied. He says one thing and then he runs into resistance from members of his own administration, people like Senator Lindsey Graham, and the entire media establishment in the United States. So that although he says these things, he's prevented from doing them.
You've taken enormous criticism in your career, and you've always stood up very well to it, because you've talked about or tried to educate people about the Zionist influence in politics in the West, but not just in politics, but in the media, and you've been called racist and anti-Semitic and all of that nonsense, when you always did brilliantly to differentiate between the Zionist lobby and its influence and ordinary Jewish men and women. You've always made that distinction. Talk to us about Zionist influence, Christopher, because it's always been there, but it seems that in the Trump administration, that influence is there, and it seems to be on steroids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. But I mean, that was a given because Trump said that he wanted to be the most pro-Israel candidate out there when he was putting together his campaign, and his own family indicates that his son-in-law Jared Kushner is a hard, extreme Zionist, involved in settlement activity on the West Bank, what have you, and his choice to be the ambassador to Israel is also extremely right-wing Zionist. So we knew that Trump would be a Zionist, and that he would pursue, goals for the Zionists, for Netanyahu, that no other president had done. Bush was a Zionist, and Obama was a Zionist, and Clinton was a Zionist, but as you said, this administration is almost like on steroids. By moving the embassy to Jerusalem, he created another source of tension. Been a lot of violence because of that, and the Zionists seem to have gotten basically from the Trump administration carte blanche. So the only positive thing about it is that it will hasten. We hope that it'll hasten the demise of the whole rotten house of cards, because as they advance their agenda faster, it will show that it'll show its weakness and its inability to be sustained in the long run.
There's a listener listening in Donegal contacted me today. Donegal, for those who don't know where it is, I know you know where it is, Christopher. Donegal is in the northwest of Ireland. A beautiful place. Her name is Claire O'Reilly, big follower of yours, Christopher. And she asked me to put to you, do you think that Trump might have been carefully chosen by the elite, by the hidden hand, to be the chaos president? Because we've often, you and I, when we first began speaking many years ago, we talked about the New World Order and how the New World Order is supposed to be created out of chaos. Was Trump chosen because he's just a narcissistic puppet, that he doesn't know what's going on, but he was chosen unknowingly to him to be the chaos president, to throw us all into more and more chaos, out of which can come order and more draconian legislation and draconian rules? It's a good question by Claire. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's very likely, because for one, all presidential candidates that get onto the national stage in the United States of America, those who are carried in the media, those who get media coverage, those who are allowed to be in the debates, they're selected. They're selected by the deep state, if you will. They're chosen by the powers behind the presidency, and in the run up to the election in 2016, the Fox News network, which is Rupert Murdoch and the Rothschilds, was pushing the Trump candidacy, all the time. They split the American body politic between CNN being pro Clinton and Fox News being pro Trump. And yes, I think that's probably what the whole situation is all about, that he was chosen for this position knowing that he would be amenable to their demands, that he would be a very good Shabbat goy, whatever, somebody who would do what they want, and it could be controlled. And that's what they got. And
he might not even be aware of it, Christopher, because Trump, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that Trump is a stupid man. He's not, but narcissistic people who crave attention and who crave power, maybe Trump was just thrilled to be the president, thrilled to be, I proved to everybody I'm the man. I had this huge TV hit, The Apprentice. I conquered television. Now I'm the man. And that really all that Trump is interested in is the ceremonial role. And that maybe the elites knew that, and that they could use Trump. He'd be just happy to be the president. I mean, who wouldn't, be delighted being the president? And that he could easily be used then to implement any of these terrible policies that they want to implement.
Yes, and I remember looking into The Apprentice, who produced it, And if I recall correctly, two of the main producers were British. So, I mean, it's like, the hidden hand of the Rothschilds isn't very far away from the Trump presidency.
No.
And of course, the Rothschilds are the ones who financed and built the media mogul Rupert Murdoch. So, Murdoch is a media mogul for as long as the Rothschilds want him to be.
Can you help me out here, Christopher? Can you help me out? Because when the name Rothschild comes up on this program, frequently, it doesn't come up every week, but it comes up frequently. Again, you're an old friend of ours. We've talked about this family, this dynasty, many times. Can you give us some kind of a? I often use the term a kind of a Cliff Note version. People don't hear of the Rothschilds anymore. They hear of HSBC Bank, they hear of Goldman Sachs, of course, but they never hear Rothschild. How can we know that the Rothschild family is still very much influential in global finance and global politics today? How can we demonstrate that to people?
Yeah, it's not difficult. I mean, when you look, for example, at the complex of characters involved in 9/11, the people who made executive decisions, the people who were key supporters of the war on terror, people like Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister of Israel, for example. Just before he came back to Israel in 1979 and began pushing the war on terror doctrine, he had worked for a Rothschild company in Boston called Boston Consulting. And you find this connection to Rothschild North America or Rothschild, Britain, in basically all of the key players in 9/11. The guy that ran the CIA at the time of 9/11, his name was Buzzy Krongord, Alvin Krongord. His wife, who's not Jewish, she worked for Rothschild North America. And time and time again, you find this. So the Rothschilds are like one step removed from the people who are culprits in the 9/11 cover-up and deception. And it's the same sort of thing. Like when you look at the Rothschilds, they own major newspapers and magazines and across Europe, and they financed Rupert Murdoch when he was in Australia. And then he came to the United States and bought 160 newspapers across the United States and England in a very short order. And you have to ask yourself, how does a Rupert Murdoch from Australia come to the United States and buy up all these main media properties? How does he do it? Where's the financing come from? You see,
he was bankrolled.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense that one individual can come from another country and take over the American media industry in a few years. And that's what happened, and the Rothschilds, of course, are a big family, but they control many strategic mineral firms, whether gold mines in Australia, gold mines in Mali. Mali's a good example. When the French went down to Mali a couple of years ago and to fight against the Muslim fanatics, whatever they were doing down there, there were three principal gold mining companies at work in Mali, which is a gold-rich country. And all three of them were controlled by the Rothschild family. So you can see that Macron, the president of France today, is a Rothschild investment banker.
That's right, yeah.
So it's like this isn't hidden. It's just not talked about. It's not talked about because the Rothschilds own the media to the point that they can keep their name out of the news.
And it's funny, it's not even just the mainstream media. There are people in the so-called alternative media who won't go anywhere near it because they are afraid of being called anti-Semitic or haters of Jews. I've never seen the Rothschilds as Jews. I've believed in my heart and soul that this particular family has hidden behind their Jewish identity, when in fact they couldn't give a damn about Jews or Jewishness or religion. But this family's influence is all pervasive and has been for for centuries. You've described it excellently there, how they go about their business, and it's very much like the mafia families would have operated in New York. The famous 5 families. Mm-hmm. The heads of the 5 mafia families would always put buffers between them and the various companies and the various unions that they controlled and the various subsidiaries. And it was very difficult for people to trace back to the patriarch or the heads of these families. And I think with the Rothschild banking dynasty, that's what it is. It's difficult for people to trace their ownership and their control of the very many things that they own and control. The media. Just talk about that for a minute, about that independent media. We don't have much of an independent media left, do we, anymore? When they won't talk about these things because they're scared of being called anti-Semitic or racist.
That's right. We, in the United States, the situation is very dire. In fact, that something like 90% of the media outlets are controlled by only 6 corporations. So we have this accumulation or this consolidation of media outlets in the United States, so that in America, people only really hear or see one point of view, and that point of view is very carefully controlled. And I want to say one thing about the Rothschilds is that they have an advantage over the mafia in the sense that the Rothschilds have controlled for more than 100 years some very big secret societies. And if one is interested in this subject, they can look at the Encyclopedia of Israel and Zionism, printed in Israel back in 1970, and read about how the Rothschilds created secret societies in Europe in order to cultivate Zionism among the people of Eastern Europe, the Jews of Eastern Europe. And they used B'nai Moshe, sons of Moses, B'nai Brith, the lovers of Zion. There were several, and there still exist. The use of secret societies is really key to understanding how people can conspire in an open society like the United States.
And did they groom people, Christopher, in these secret societies like Skull and Bones? Mm-hmm. Now, you know far more about these than I do because you've researched them. By the way, I'm just going to remind our listeners, if you're just joining us, delighted that my old friend Christopher Bollyn is back live on the show. Check out bollyn.com. That's BOLLYN.com. Christopher's on Twitter as well. Read his books, folks. Check him out. Solving 9/11, The Deception That Changed the World is a must read. And it's available at all good online retailers. You can find links to it at Christopher's website. I mean it, it's a must read. And it's great to be chatting with Christopher Bollyn because his enemies and his critics have never taken him on any specific thing that he's ever said. His books are peerless. Read the books. They are referenced. They are researched. I'm telling you, I'm endorsing this man. I want to talk about these secret societies, right? Mm-hmm. Because explain to us, they're used, as far as I understand, and again, you know more than I do, they're used to groom future acquiescent, not just political leaders, but captains of industry. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that seems to be how they control so much of the American political scene. For example, when 9/11 happened, they controlled, Zionists controlled the law enforcement that was involved, Justice Department, mass media in the United States, the process of litigation, the court process that resulted, security at the World Trade Center and at the airports. They controlled the government with these Zionist neocons who controlled the Bush administration, and they controlled the military. In that they had half a dozen Zionists who created something called, who were part of something called the Defense Policy Board, who crafted the policy of, for example, overthrowing 7 countries in 5 years. And when you look at that, and it's like total Zionist control of all fundamental aspects of American political life. How do they do this? Well, they do this through their use of secret societies. Like you said, in these secret societies, they cultivate and prepare people to take the reins of, CBS News or CNN or what have you. And by controlling the media in the United States, as they do, they control how Americans think. And I just put up a little piece today on Facebook about this because the question is how has this small group of people, of Zionists, how have they been able to take control and hijack the United States, a country of some 330 million people? Well, if you control what those 330 million people think and hear, then you have a real advantage to controlling every other aspect of life.
We've had loads of tweets on this already. Patricia is listening to this in Switzerland. Long-time listener and friend of ours. The Rothschilds didn't just create societies in Europe. They created Israel, says Patricia. They control the media. Dare I suggest that is exactly why Americans have no clue what is going on in Gaza. That's an excellent comment, and I think she's right. I do sympathise with... No, I've got to phrase this properly. Because I'm not virtue signalling. I know I'm lucky enough to know a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds in the city of Manchester, and I work closely with members of if there is such a thing as the Jewish community in Manchester. People I work with and have worked with, great people. They get very worried when they hear people throwing around terms like Rothschild and Rothschild Zionist, and they think that people like you, Christopher, and others, and other friends of mine, they think that, look, this is just a cover, and a very poor cover for racism, and that what we're really doing is just blaming the Jews for everything. And they really feel that. A lot of Jews who are actively opposed to the concentration camp that is Gaza, and to the manipulation of that region by the Zionist government of Israel. A lot of Jews say, we're fed up of it because when you say Rothschild, what you really mean is Jews, and you just blame the Jews for everything. Do you want to speak to that, Christopher? Do you want to answer that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can understand this. It's not we're not talking about an ethnic, a group of an ethnic crime, for example. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a specific crime. And like the person said from Switzerland, the Rothschild role in creating the state of Israel has to be understood. So I really advise people who are interested in this in looking at that encyclopedia on Israel and Zionism. It's a 2-volume set, and read about the Rothschilds. Read about how they created the first 30 settlements in Israel. The first one being, of course, Rishon LeZion, the first in Zion, where General Danny Rothschild is from, the guy who's in charge of Israeli military strategy and planning, Danny Rothschild. And look at the 500 shekel bill, the Israeli shekel, 500 bill. It's got the image of Edmund Rothschild on there. Edmund Rothschild from France was the godfather of the creation of the state of Israel. So Israel is really a Rothschild state, a state that was fomented, created, funded, developed by the Rothschilds. So when Israel does something, the Rothschilds are connected by virtue of being like the owners. They have this ownership stake in the state of Israel.
Do you disagree with me, Christopher? Do you disagree with me? I've always believed that these financiers like Oppenheimer and Warburg and Rothschild, they've used their Jewish identity as a cover. They're not Jews. In reality, they're not Jews. There's something far different. I even think I get absolutely hammered. I get so criticised for this. I think there's some other worldly thing going on there with these people and who they are. They're not Jews, and they don't benefit Jews, these people. They're something completely different. Am I right in saying that?
Well, you're absolutely right, because if you look at 9/11, just at the most simple glimpse, you have to say that 9/11 was done by people who are extremely evil, people who are serving evil in this world. And that's something we can't forget. So as you know, many of these free societies, when you get to the highest levels of these societies, when you become a 33rd degree Mason, for example, you find that the actual entity that's being served is the evil one, is Lucifer, is devil, and that these societies are not secret for no reason. There's a reason why they're secret, and that's so that they can do the evil that they do in our free societies.
Yeah.
It's a real conundrum, because how do you deal with democratic societies in which you have secret societies at work conspiring against the benefit of the state? It's a real problem.
It's a massive problem. Christopher Bollyn is our guest, and Christopher is going to stay with us for another 20, 25 minutes, if that's okay with you, Christopher.
That's fine.
It's great to have you back on the programme, my friend. It's been too long. And if you haven't checked out bollyn.com before, check it out. And I'm telling you, read Solving 9/11, The Deception That Changed the World. For me, it's the definitive work on that atrocity. It's great. It really is good to have you back on the show, Christopher. On the shekel, I know you know this. Just to clarify, Christopher is right. The Edmund James the Rothschild image was on at one time on the 500 shekel note up until the late 1980s, I believe, and that is significant, as Christopher said. It really is. It's also got to be pointed out, going down this angle of Satanism, it's very important to point out there are, in the archives, there are a number of photo albums of the Rothschild men and women as recently as the 1950s, 1960s, going to masked balls, dancing and dining out, and some of the things they are wearing are positively Luciferian. You've even got some of the Rothschild women wearing Baphomet costumes and stuff like that. That's not a joke, Christopher. That's not a coincidence. There's something very sinister going on there, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's like you can see by the deeds that they do, by what they do. My latest book is The War on Terror, The Plot to Rule the Middle East. And that in that book, I explain how 9/11 was done in order to kickstart the War on Terror, which was actually planned in the 1970s. And so what we're seeing across the Middle East is the United States waging war against countries like Iraq and Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Sudan, what have you, Libya, in order to benefit Israel, but also in order to steal their resources, like the resources of Libya, the money, the gold, the oil, and Syria. And what you find is time and time again, you find the Rothschilds are the ones who are benefiting from, access to or ownership of the resources of countries like Syria and Iraq, like the oil in Kurdistan. The Rothschilds played a key role in that. The Rothschilds own, along with people like Dick Cheney and a few others, they own the oil of the Golan Heights, which is occupied, Syria. So that's what they're all after. They're after the riches of the world, control of the Middle East, and as you said, it's positively evil.
Yeah, it is evil. I've just tweeted out a picture in case people think that you and I have lost our minds of Mary Elaine the Rothschild, I think it is, at a ball. She's with a guy called Baron Alexis de Rede, and she's wearing the Baphomet thing. Nobody can explain to me, and I'm a pretty jocular, like yourself, Christopher. I'm an easygoing guy, and I'm wide open to being told I'm wrong, and I'm wrong so often that I get used to it. I don't mind being wrong, but nobody's going to tell me that there isn't anything sinister or rotten with those images of them wearing the horns, the satanic stuff, and this Mary Elaine the Rothschild wearing the goat's head, the Baphomet thing at a ball. Who wears that to a ball? Who does that?
And you see, the ownership of the media plays a key role in this. Like, ever since they've consolidated the media as they have in the past 10, 15 years in the United States, you see how the media has turned to become extremely pro-Satanist, pushing this evil agenda and this acceptance of evil onto the American people. And that's since people like the Bronfmans and the Rothschilds have gained complete ownership monopoly over the U.S. media. So they're pushing Satanism now. They're pushing it on young people and through the media, through the music.
Do you see it in the imagery because again, it's something I know a little bit about, but only because I've spoken with researchers like yourself. Mm-hmm. The satanic imagery that is popping up in television programs and in music videos. Now, I know it's something that people like David Icke and Jim Mars, rest in peace, again, an old friend of ours, Jim wrote about this extensively as well. You see a lot of that satanic imagery in these videos and in television programs. What are they doing with that imagery, Christopher? Is it because the images themselves actually make some sort of sound or have some sort of impact on the person who sees the image? Is that what's going on? I don't understand.
Yeah, what they're really doing is they're inculcating this set of beliefs into young people. Young people consume a great deal of this media, movies, music, and the musicians are forced to go along with this agenda, to do these things, to make these symbols and gestures, and it's to basically hijack how young people think about Satanism and about the evil that's rampant in the world. If the people were getting messages like they got in the media back in the 50s and 60s, there would be resistance to this evil agenda that's going on. I mean, this is the most amazing thing, that in the United States of America, for example, we've been at war for 17 years in the Middle East. We've done, our country's done terrible, terrible things. Our military's done terrible things to people all around the Middle East and North Africa. And there's been barely a whimper of protest from the young people. Woodstock happened in 1969. I see they're going to do another Woodstock 50 years later, but there is no more resistance to the evil agenda, and that's because the media has cultivated this evilness through the products they make, the films and music, etc. People accept it.
They've been incredibly successful, haven't they, in giving people like us what looks like opposition. They're geniuses at doing this. To keep us interested, they present somebody or some man or some woman that looks like it's anti-establishment, and then we all run off like chasing the Pied Piper, and we weigh in behind the new hero of the revolution, only to find out later on that the person was an establishment figure all along. A classic example of that must be what happened in Greece. I mean, I did say, Christopher, that I get a lot of things wrong, and I do. But Christ, excuse my language, I got the Alexis Syriza party in Greece 100% right. When Syriza came to power, Yanis Varoufakis and Alexis Tsipras, I knew that it was controlled opposition, that this party would never deliver Greece out of the hands of the bankers, and by God, I was right. They are very successful. I think it's happening in Italy now. People think that the Italian government, the new coalition government, is anti-establishment, but they'll fold like a pack of cards as well. They're very successful in presenting their own opposition, right?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. I mean, as you said before about the Trump administration, they do it in countries big and small, and yeah, they're able to control the political discussion almost completely.
How do we beat that, Christopher? You've spoken to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Your books have done very well. You're not the only one. There are other men and women like it. Not too many, but you're out there. Shows like this don't like to brag, but it's got an enormous reach. And still, because of our basic, we're tiny compared to the mainstream media. How do we reach more people? What do we need to do?
Well, that's very hard. I mean, because that's the same problem they have in the United States. That it's very hard to reach a really large audience without having huge backing. Like Alex Jones. Alex Jones has had a lot of backing and was promoted greatly as being, again, this alternative voice that was only alternative to a certain degree, and was known for being very pro-Israel. So how do we do it? Well, we have to keep doing what we're doing and stress the things that need to be achieved. And with September 11th, for example, there needs to be a proper investigation and accountability for the people who committed 9/11. If we're willing to allow our history and our politics to go forward based on lies that are egregious and blatant, like those about September 11th, then we really are forfeiting our hope for any sort of truly democratic republic.
Are you disappointed, Christopher, with what became of InfoWars? Look, I've got to preface this by saying, when I speak to somebody who's appeared on InfoWars like yourself, somebody who's been very good to InfoWars, given your time and your research and your work. I've obviously known Alex like yourself for a number of years. I used to bring him on programs like this and we would chat. And Alex was very much, I suppose, in alignment with what I would call the genuine independent or the genuine alternative media, that he genuinely believed and genuinely said that the left and the right is nothing but two sides of the one coin. And, it was a very good platform. It was great long before this programme, which is a tiny programme compared to InfoWars, but long before I came along and others like me came along, he was a vanguard. He was out there. He was a great platform. What happened to InfoWars? It's terrible now. What's gone on?
Well, I don't know, all the details at all, because I don't follow Alex Jones very closely. I was on his radio show. The last time was about 2005 or 2004. I'd been on it several times when he was kind of small, and then after he, after 9/11, several years after 9/11, like by 2006, I was no longer requested to be on the show, and my line of investigation was not being discussed. So Alex Jones has been, though, magnified and amplified. His voice has been amplified, and there's no way I can tell you that a true independent operator like myself or yourself can become so big without an injection of a lot of outside capital. And that's what they did. They built him up, and they created him as the alternative voice, and by doing that, he basically made us look smaller because he took over the roles that we played. For example, I was one of the first people to cover Bilderberg as a photographer back in 2000. And then a couple of years later, after he started going to Bilderberg with a megaphone and really making himself into a big spectacle. It's all designed to do that. He's there to. He became
the story, Christopher. He became. Yeah, you are a journalist and an author, and the subject of your writing is the most important thing. The story is important because you're a journalist, a proper journalist. Alex became the story, didn't he?
Right. And then by becoming this Pied Piper, if you will, he led a very large group of people. And so then when he has this target, or this captive audience, whichever way he goes, they will follow. And that's like we see that with big leaders like Noam Chomsky, who is a big leader in the left in the United States of America. And he poo-poos the idea of the Kennedy assassination being anything other than what the Warren Commission report says, and he poo-poos the idea of 9/11 being anything other than what the official government report says. So, in this way, he has taken his audience, this huge left in America, away from being 9/11 truthers or Kennedy murder truthers.
I've never understood that. How could Noam Chomsky, a supposed doyen of critical thinking, how could he believe the official version of the Kennedy assassination? I suppose most importantly, the reason I say most importantly is because I kind of understand why those old guys, Chomsky, don't want to contemplate 9/11. I can understand it. I don't like it, but I can understand it. But how could he possibly throw in with the Warren Commission? That's just rubbish. He knows better, right, Christopher? He must do.
Oh, of course. He must know better. But for some reason, perhaps tribal affiliation, he refuses to go there.
And yet it's funny, there's a big row broke out today and yesterday in the UK media because George Galloway, I know you know who George Galloway is, Galloway was tweeting about Chomsky, and then a female television presenter called Rachel Riley, she called Galloway anti-Semitic, and then Chomsky's name came up because Chomsky is often, as you quite rightly said, held up by the left as an example of a Jewish man who speaks out against Israel. But I've never been entirely... I've interviewed Chomsky a couple of times, going way back, but I've never been entirely comfortable with Chomsky. I've never believed that Chomsky was very sincere. That's just me personally. But yeah, but he is heralded as, the Jewish opposition to Israel. But right. That's not very helpful, I don't believe. But anyway, what do you think?
Right. Well, it's like I said, is that he becomes the leader of a movement. Many people who feel that they can't understand the whole picture rely on somebody who they can believe in. And as I said, millions of people in the American left and Canadian left have believed in Noam Chomsky for decades. And so that if Noam Chomsky says 9/11 was something done by Osama bin Laden, people will believe it. They'll say that there's no reason to challenge the official story. Our leader Chomsky has made it clear for us, and this is how they control huge amounts of politically active people.
You're describing identity politics brilliantly, which is devastating to growing and to learning. By identifying as a socialist and by identifying yourself in the same group as Noam Chomsky, you are forevermore accepting that whatever the group says or whatever the group leader says, well, that must be my official position too. That's the danger, isn't it, with identity politics? You can't identify as a socialist or as a conservative because all you're doing is narrowing your own field of vision, right?
Right. I mean, when we're talking about a crime like the Kennedy murder or the either Kennedy murder or the 9/11, we have to look at the evidence, and we have to, see what the evidence leads us to understand. And that's something that, most people just don't have the time or inclination to do. So they need somebody to interpret for them what is going on. And even the U.S. military at the Pentagon after 9/11 relied on outside interpretation of the 9/11 events to guide policy. This was done by the Israelis. The Israeli chief of staff interpreted for the Americans what happened on 9/11 and escorted us into the Middle East to wage war against Israel's enemies to benefit the Zionist project and the Rothschilds. And that's where we've been for 17 years. And it's like you and I we can't understand how the rest of our populations can be so dumb, so unwilling to see the evidence in front of them. But it's because they just don't have the time or the effort to do so.
That's right, and I think first of all you're spot on. I think also people are a bit nervous about the next step. So if I listen to Christopher Bollyn and I accept that what Christopher has said is accurate, what do I do now? And people don't want to deal with that question. What do I do now? What do I do with that information? Because it makes them feel guilty and embarrassed, and it makes them feel helpless. And they don't need to feel helpless, really, because knowing this stuff is power, and sharing it is power.
Right, but as you said, when people understand that they've been lied to about 9/11, and they realize they've been lied to by the government and by the media, you're pulling away from the average American or average Briton this sense of trust that they have in their government and in the media. And if that's a very very angst provide, it gives you a lot of anxiety to understand that your government media are lying to you in order to take us to war.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Christopher. It is the ultimate conundrum. Most people, I've had it, even when I've presented programs like this on commercial radio. When I was presenting this show back on Talk Radio Europe many years ago, mainstream radio station, I used to talk about this stuff and speak with you and other people. And then you would leave, you would go back to Helya, you would have your dinner, and I would continue the show for another hour, and I would open the show to callers. And the callers would be saying, I can't believe you had that guy Bollyn on there. I can't believe that. And then, now they wouldn't be rude, but they would say, Richie, do you really believe that our government could do that to us? And this was the common theme. Richie, come on. Can you really believe that, the people we elected, that the men and women, do you really believe that they could be behind this stuff? And I used to just sigh. I would just sigh and let them off because, I believe in open radio. Let people say what they want to say. And think to myself, will they ever accept that all is not what it appears? That their elected officials are not getting out of bed every day to work for them? Why can't they see that they are being manipulated and controlled? Christopher, we've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to give you the final word, but before you have the final word, folks, Christopher is the author of The War on Terror, The Plot to Rule the Middle East. Terrific work, this, and also the groundbreaking Solving 9/11, The Deception That Changed the World. The War on Terror, The Plot to Rule the Middle East, his most recent book. They are available on Amazon and other good online retailers. All the details you need to find out about these books and more about Christopher can be found at bollyn.com. That's BOLLYN.com. final word to you, mate, and it's been great to catch up with you.
Well, thank you very much, Richie. Yeah, I let people know that the 3-book set, the 2 Solving 9/11 books and the War on Terror book, are available directly through me, through my website, for $50, which is about a 28% saving off the Amazon price. And I wanted to say that chapter 10 of the Solving 9/11 book is Who Controls Our Political Parties. And it really focuses on the 2 prime ministers of the beginning of the War on Terror, Tony Blair and Gordon
Brown. Gordon Brown, yeah.
Gordon Brown, yeah. Thank you. And how they were controlled by, Lord Cashpoint and their handlers, that they had very high-level handlers who were controlling them. And it's the same in the United States, that our politicians are controlled so that the governments that we think represent us are not really representing us at all, but they're representing the people that control them. And that's why we're in this predicament. And so we have a huge job ahead of us, and that job will not get any smaller if we ignore it. It's really incumbent on us as free men and women to take control of our societies and demand truth and accountability for the crimes and the wars that have followed September 11th. And starting with understanding what happened on September 11th, then we will be able to unravel this whole Gordian knot and release ourselves from this hellish state we've been in for the last 17 years.
Christopher, brilliant. Do me a favour. I do say this to certain guests, but I do mean it. Working without a producer or an editor, it's just me here. I do fall out of the loop at times because it's just inevitable. Don't, and I know you're the same, you're on your own, you're completely self-contained, you and Helia there. Don't wait to be asked back. When you've got something going on, get in touch. Don't wait for me to contact you. And thanks for coming back today. Regards to Helia. Happy New Year to you and yours. Oh. And thanks for your work, Christopher.
Thank you very much, Richie. It's been a pleasure.
It's an honour, my friend. Speak again real soon. Christopher Bollyn, live on the line from his home. Christopher's in Scandinavia, of course, these days. And I want to, before I run out of time, I want to say a big hi to Phil Restino, who's been emailing me today. Phil, thanks for the emails. Phil tweets. Phil's been on the programme and hopefully he'll be on the programme again too. Terrific activist and researcher is Phil. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Each one of us can do something each day. Write to websites such as Architects and Engineers 911truth.org, AE911truth.org, on the bathroom wall above the urinal, or a restaurant menu, or on a piece of outgoing mail. It's a brilliant idea, that. Write a website URL on a piece of mail or on a bathroom wall like AE911truth.org. It's a brilliant idea. Ask a customer service representative on the phone when seeking help over the telephone if they know about chemtrails, and then give them the website geoengineeringwatch.org. Wear a truth t-shirt and or cap when out and about. Put a truth bumper sticker on your vehicle or some other surface visible to the public. Download and print out truth flyers and pass out to people. Leave in waiting rooms of doctors' offices or motor vehicles or other government offices. Put the flyers in the postage paid return envelopes that come with junk mail. Everybody can do something. Do something, says my pal Phil Restino. Thanks, Phil, for that, mate. That's absolutely brilliant, and it's a brilliant idea and stuff that I don't think of very much, to be honest. Liz tweets, the truth will set you free but will massively piss you off first. I don't know about first, Liz. I think piss you off came second for me. Scared the absolute bejesus out of me came first, but you're right, piss you off came second. Hi to Thomas Daniel Jones. How you doing, Thomas? A lot of scary, weird and completely bizarre images have been tweeted from official events attended by some of these financiers like the Rothschilds, and they're absolutely incredible. This is the satanic stuff, the Baphomet stuff as well that we were talking about, that Christopher was talking about to me. Patricia came back to say, if people decide to believe Noam Chomsky or anyone else without doing their own research, those people are followers and not in control of their own lives and beliefs even. They are sad and lost souls who have no opinions of their own. That is the essence of identity politics. That is the essence of thinking as a... You know, to be fair to Ike, if you've ever seen him live, it's an excellent it's an excellent segment that he does. I think thinking as a socialist, thinking as a conservative, or speaking as a white man, or speaking as a black woman. I derive my opinions from the social construct that I have glued myself to. David Icke would go on to say, we're not left, right, black, white, gay, straight. We are infinite awareness, he would say. And I agree with him. That's what we are. When you derive your opinions and your belief system from a social construct, from a group that you have, as I said, aligned yourself to, well, you're starting from a false premise. Try seeing the world from the point of view as I am a completely unique, individually thinking, individual minded, infinite consciousness, awareness, pure energy. I am totally unique in the universe. And I will form my opinions based on my feelings and my beliefs about those events. And I won't get my opinions spoon-fed to me by anybody else. I won't do that. There you are. It's not that profound, really. It should be basic common sense, shouldn't it? And common knowledge to people. You know, I will form my worldview based on my own feelings, my own opinions, my own research, not what anybody else tells me to think, or not what the group says. My group is, I'm a socialist, champagne socialist. I'm not a socialist. I would be considered a socialist because of the things I believe about the workplace and about the workers and all of that. But I don't go along with socialism or anything else. I think for myself. I often think and get things wrong. My thoughts often lead me down, incorrect avenues, or I go down avenues and I form opinions that are not right, but I eventually figure it out and I move on. That's it for today's programme. Massive thanks to David Vance coming on in the first hour. Check out biasedbbc.org if you haven't checked it out before. biasedbbc.org. altnewsmedia.net. That's altnewsmedia.net. And a huge shout out to Christopher Bollyn. Great to have Christopher on the programme today. Christopher can be found at Bollyn, BOLLYN.com. That's Bollyn, BOLLYN.com. Leave you and love you. Back with you tomorrow, Thursday, at the usual time. It is Thursday tomorrow, isn't it? I think it is, isn't it? Is today the third show of the week? I think it is. Yes, today is Wednesday, January 9th. Back with you tomorrow, Thursday, at 5 p.m. UK time. Until we speak again, you and I, look after yourselves and one another. Leaving with the Swedish group in honour of Helge Bollyn, Christopher's better half. This is Walking in Your Footsteps from Shout Out Louds. Closing out today's programme. See you tomorrow. Bye for now. Thanks for tweeting me. Bye now.